Welcome, everyone, to a Tuesday episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast here at the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. Today on the show, it's NFL Cut Down Day. Man, that's a depressing day. I really lament this day because it's the end of a lifelong dream for a lot of football players. And we're going to talk today about, well, what's that mean? To see this thing that you've thrown your entire self into for so long really come to an end. How do you cope with that? How do you move on? And then we'll catch up on some of the news. A lot of news yesterday, Monday, and unfolding around the league, cuts, trades, signings, and there'll be far more news today. If you're listening in the morning, Tuesday morning, the official cut down deadline is 4 p.m. today. All NFL teams have to get down to their final 53 by 4 p.m. today. And NFL rosters, as recently as Sunday, were at 90. You could carry as many as 90 guys. So if you do the math, teams are going to have to cut somewhere in the neighborhood of, depending on exactly how many guys they were carrying, 35 to 40 players. It equates to over 1,100 young men getting cut, some of whom will re-sign with teams on their practice squads. Some may eventually make their way back to 53-man rosters. But for most of these guys, this is the end of the dream. And if you could take a moment and think back to when you were younger and think to yourself, what was the first dream that I had when I envisioned my future? What did I see myself as when I was young? When I was 8 years old, 9 years old. My daughter Shiloh is 7. And she'll every once in a while give us an update on what she wants to do with her life. Dad, when I'm a grown up, she says, when I'm growed up. Dad, when I'm growed up, I want to be a veterinarian. We've had a veterinarian phase. She wants to be a dancer. She wants to be an actress. I don't know what she'll eventually land on, but these are her earliest dreams. These are things that, for whatever reason, capture her heart, her imagination, things that in her 7-year-old mind, she can see herself devoting her life to. And obviously, when you're 7, it's not that complex. You like horses, so you want to be a veterinarian. You went and saw Wicked, and so now you want to be an actress. It's pretty simple as far as that goes. But these dreams form early. When I was a child, I wanted to be a pro football player. That was my dream. I loved Jack Lambert and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I loved linebackers. I followed Chris Spielman from his playing days at Ohio State into the NFL. I eventually fell in love with safeties, guys like Ronnie Lott, and I wanted to do what they did. And sometime around maybe the middle of my high school experience, when I began to realize how good NFL players were, that dream began to dissipate. And I started to, I don't know if you say resign yourself, maybe, is that the right way to say it? But you began to come to terms, maybe that's a little more optimistic, with the fact that dream wasn't going to be realized. And I still wanted to take football as far as I could take it. So I went and I played in college, and I got a teaching degree because I always had loved history, and I had some great relatives who were good storytellers, would tell really interesting stories about their own lives, but also about American history. And I decided, hey, I'm going to be a history teacher and I'm going to coach football. And that's what I've been doing for my entire life. I found a way to not have to give up on the dream totally, because I'm still so heavily invested in this sport that I love so much, that has given me so much, and that I've invested so much in. But for those who get way closer than I ever did as players, cut down day is devastating. I've talked to plenty of former Division I players, guys who were drafted, guys who didn't quite make it, from friends of mine who were signed as undrafted free agents and had a cup of coffee in the NFL, in training camps with teams, to guys who I know in the coaching community who were on NFL rosters, largely as fringe players, special teamers, back of the roster guys, etc. They all talk about this reckoning that when cut down day comes and you get that phone call, if you've ever watched Hard Knocks, right? They text you, hey, coach wants to see you in his office. And then you get the fateful line, bring your playbooks. When you get the line that says bring your playbooks, it's the end of the road. And for anybody who's been there, the immediate issue is the saying goodbye to whatever team you're with. The coaches, your teammates, clearing out your locker, doing practical things like figuring out how you're going to get a ride to the airport and what flight you're going to take back home or wherever you're going. Ben DiNucci, NFL backup quarterback, posted a picture on X the other day of a beer at an airport bar with the saying, I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but he said something along the lines of, there's no beer better than the just been cut for the 7th time airport beer. And I thought that was a wonderful example of self-awareness and humility and being able to laugh at himself in a way. But really what he was saying was, here I am again, man. I keep chasing the dream. And Ben DiNucci, to his credit, has had a little bit of success in the NFL. He's made it farther than 99% of the people who will ever play the game. But here he is again. He's been cut 7 times. And maybe this will be the last for him. You never know. Because that's what ultimately comes next for all these guys. After you say your goodbyes to your immediate surroundings and you pack your bag and you get to the airport and you fly home, inevitably, there comes the moment where you say, well, what now? As people talk about, sometimes you'll hear them say, it's time for that young man to get on with his life's work. That is a really hard moment to get so close to the dream, the thing you've dreamed about your entire life. For guys like Ben DiNucci, to get a taste of it, to have a little of it. Never enough that you feel satisfied, that you feel complete. Enough to know you're so very close, but yet so far away. They talk about professional athletes having depression issues over this. Not being able to reconcile with it. Not having a clear plan for what's next. And spiraling into, whether it's depression or unfortunately sometimes it manifests in substance abuse, but the inability to prepare for something else can be crippling. Because if you're going to be good enough to make it to the NFL or even be in that conversation, make it to a training camp, get drafted, sign as an undrafted free agent, your entire focus for most of your life must be singular. You can't simultaneously be preparing for an NFL career and also preparing for the if I don't make it in the NFL career. It's almost impossible. Myron Rolle, who was with the Pittsburgh Steelers for a little bit, out of Florida State, got into their camp as a defensive back but was cut, re-signed somewhere else, I can't remember what team, was cut. is a neurosurgeon. I mean, he majored in medicine in college, and he did an internship to become a neurosurgeon while he was simultaneously trying to make it as an NFL defensive back. He's a brilliant individual, and he talked eloquently about his inability to have both. You couldn't have both. I couldn't prepare to become a neurosurgeon and devote the time necessary to being an NFL player as well. There's no real ability to have dual careers. So I put all my eggs in the NFL basket, and then if it doesn't work out, then I try to figure out what's next. That's how it works for most individuals. And whether it's today or tomorrow or maybe sometime a little bit later this week, over 1,100 young men are going to have to face that decision. A small fraction of them will get another opportunity in the NFL. The vast majority will have to figure out what's next. And it's worth taking a moment just to honor those players because, again, they made it further than 99% of the people who will ever play the game of football. But cracking that 1%, that less than 1%, who actually makes it to and succeeds in the NFL is a completely different level. And so for all those who don't make it, congratulations on everything that you've been able to accomplish. And I wish you the best as you get on with your life's work, as they say. All right, quickly, let's talk about some of the news that happened on Monday. A lot of stuff went down. On yesterday's podcast, one of the things I discussed were the 3 holdout NFL stars who had not yet come to terms with their respective teams. Terry McLaurin in Washington, Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati, and Micah Parsons in Dallas. And in the case of McLaurin specifically, I asked the question, what's Washington waiting for? They're a contender. And they had a bad preseason, and it feels like they need Terry McLaurin right now. And no sooner had that podcast aired than the news broke that McLaurin had reached an agreement on a $32 million per year deal with the Commanders that will extend him 3 seasons. So that's a great deal for a guy who's about to turn 30. And later in the day, the news emerged that Trey Hendrickson had signed a 1-year deal in Cincinnati that is going to increase his pay by almost 50%, which means we're down to 1. Jerry Jones, Micah Parsons, and the Dallas Cowboys. Is anyone surprised that Dallas is the last team standing when it comes to the drama of their star player? And I don't know what's going to happen there, but if Dallas winds up doing the right thing and paying Parsons, that will be the surprise. All right, the Las Vegas Raiders made a couple of high-profile moves on Monday. They signed Amari Cooper, who had been with Vegas previously in his career. He goes back to Las Vegas. And in light of the injury to backup quarterback Aiden O'Connell, who broke his, I don't know if it was his wrist or his hand, something on his throwing hand. He's going to be out for a while. They made a trade with the Cleveland Browns for Kenny Pickett. And that is interesting because it elevates Shedeur Sanders to QB3. The Browns had talked about keeping all 4. But now with the O'Connell injury, they get an opportunity to move Pickett. They get a 5th-round draft pick in return. Probably happy to make that move. But Shedeur Sanders, who looked like he might be stashed as a developmental quarterback, will be QB3. I'm going to come back to him at the end of the show because I want to make a comment real quick about some of the criticism Kevin Stefanski has received for his handling of Shedeur Sanders. But real quick, before we do that, as today plays out, a couple of names to keep an eye on. Adam Thielen, the wide receiver in Carolina. Panthers have added a bunch of wide receivers to that roster. Thielen is a veteran who's a savvy guy who's probably got enough football left in him for a contending team like Minnesota to maybe make a move to reacquire. Be interesting to see what happens with him. Kirk Cousins, is he actually going to be the backup in Atlanta? on a massive contract, which is paying him about $40 million for the season? Or are the Falcons going to try to move him to a team that may be in the quarterback market, And then some of the guys who were cut on Monday. Here are some names you might recognize. Hendon Hooker, backup quarterback in Detroit. He was cut. Lael Collins, offensive lineman, former first-round pick, cut by the Cowboys. Another quarterback, Bailey Zappi, who had a little bit of success up in New England. Chiefs cut him loose. Mike Hilton, the veteran slot defender, cut by the Dolphins. Running back Cam Akers, whose career got off to a great start, but then injuries derailed him, cut by the Saints. And former Cowboys wide receiver Michael Gallup, cut loose by the Commanders. It'd be interesting to see if any of those individuals wind up on another team. And of course, there will be some big names that just, unfortunately, don't make it as today plays out. All right, I'm going to wrap it up with this. Shedeur Sanders. There is a small army of Shedeur Sanders supporters out there who, for some reason, believe that there is a conspiracy against Shedeur Sanders. That Shedeur Sanders, who was projected by many to be the second overall pick in the draft, yet fell to the 5th round, where he was drafted, I believe, number 144 overall. That the only explanation for that is that there is some sort of conspiracy against him by NFL teams. Maybe it comes from the league office. Maybe it's NFL executives getting together to try to blackball him because they don't like his personality. They think he's too arrogant. They don't like his father. More so, they don't want Deion meddling in NFL affairs, Deion criticizing NFL teams when things go down that he doesn't like. And so Shedeur is being either blackballed or, since now obviously he wound up with the Browns, that the Browns are purposely trying to sabotage his career. That was the criticism that came out of their most recent preseason game, where Shedeur Sanders played in the 3rd and 4th quarter with a lot of the deep backups, struggled, did not have a very good night. He led 6 drives, 5 of them went 3 and out. He was 3 out of 6 for 24 yards. He took a bad sack, a 24-yard loss on a sack where he just held the ball forever and scrambled around. But rather than say, this is where he is in his career right now, he's a developmental guy who needs to learn a lot. There's this small army of Shedeur supporters who believe that Kevin Stefanski is trying to sabotage his chances. And to that group of individuals, and I'm not trying to be condescending and arrogant or dismissive or sarcastic, but I would ask them just to ponder the question, maybe he's not that good, or ponder the reality, right? Maybe Shedeur Sanders just isn't that good. You have to remember, Shedeur Sanders, who was overwhelmingly projected as a first-round pick, his draft stock began to fall as he went through the interview process with NFL head coaches and general managers. And it wasn't his father's presence, and it wasn't him being arrogant that tanked his draft stock. It was the fact that he didn't know much. He didn't know how to read a defense. He showed up to interviews unprepared. The New York Giants interview was famously one of the worst ever conducted by a top draft prospect. He didn't know anything in the install that they sent him to study when they put him on the whiteboard and asked him to go through it. He didn't know any of it. He hadn't studied it, and on the stuff that he was asked to talk about off the cuff, he couldn't do it. He couldn't talk about coverage structures. He couldn't talk about coverage beaters and where to go with the football against certain coverages. His football IQ was very low. And so while he had some pretty notable physical gifts, he was deemed a mid to late round draft pick because it was clear that he would have to be taught the game of football, not even retaught. It's not like he was taught wrong. It's just that he wasn't taught at all. That wherever he went in his college career, his father crafted the offense in a way that would just eliminate and mask the deficiencies of Shedeur Sanders' game, which allowed him to be successful in college, but of course now that he's gotten to the NFL has proven to be a significant handicap. So again, rather than question this grand conspiracy, because I know that that's what social media is for, and that's where people tend to go these days. The moment that they find something uncomfortable, they gravitate towards a conspiracy that would explain it away. Rather than do that, I think we should probably just confront the reality that right now Shedeur Sanders is just not ready to play football in the NFL. And he may get there. And I'm rooting for the guy. I talked to him at the NFL Scouting Combine. I thought he was interesting and gregarious and engaging. I'm not a hater. I'm not rooting against him. But right now, the real way to set him up for failure would be to put him in the lineup against a starting NFL defense and watch what happens then. The smart move is to bring him along slowly, and that's what the Browns are doing. All right, that is our Tuesday show. Tomorrow, Whiteboard Wednesday, my good friend and colleague Paul Callahan back on the show. It is our game week at Ocean City High School. We open up on Thursday, our first game of the year, and Coach Cal and I are going to talk about game week. What's game week look like for a coaching staff? How do you plan for an actual football game, particularly an opener, where the game planning can be a little bit more challenging for various reasons? And we'll talk about how that all works on tomorrow's show. Hope you'll join me for that. And again, to all the NFL players who have either just been cut or are about to be cut, congratulations on an incredible journey. And I wish you the best as you move away from a football life. All right, take care, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.